We continue now at the top of Daf Memtes Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 49a. On the previous summit, there was a machlokas amuroim. Let's say a person puts down a down payment in a ravon, and it's towards purchasing metaltalin. So the question is, does that create a kinyan only corresponding to the value of the down payment? This is talking about a kinyan in terms of the mishapara, or does that create a kinyan towards the entire amount of metaltalin that is being purchased? And the Gemara suggested on the previous summit that this is actually a machlokas tanoim, because the Brisa discusses a situation where a malva lends money. That's the equivalent essentially of a buyer putting down a certain amount of money, and then the malva takes a collateral, but the collateral is only worth part of what the loan, part of the value of the loan that he lends. So let's say, for example, he lends $100, but he takes a collateral that's only $50. Now, normally, when you take a collateral, so we say that Shemitah no longer cancels the loan. Essentially, the collateral is effective in stopping Shemitah from canceling the loan. And so the question in the Brisa is, if the collateral is not worth the entire loan, so is that effective or not? Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says it is effective, and Reb Yehuda Nasi says that it is not effective. And the Gemara wanted to understand, what does that mean exactly? Does Reb Shimon ben Gamliel say it's completely effective for the entire loan, or just for the value of the loan corresponding to the value of the collateral? And then the same question with Reb Yehuda Nasi. And the Gemara said, well, if you're going to say that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is saying it's only partially effective, so then Reb Yehuda Nasi has to be saying that it's not effective at all. And so the Gemara continues, Ela mashkon denaked lamale. So what's the point of even taking the mashkon if it's not effective at all? Ela lav shma minei. Rather, don't we see from this, my eino meshamit dekam Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? What does it mean that it doesn't cancel the loan according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Meaning, what does it mean when Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that this collateral is effective? It's eino meshamit bekulo. It means the entire loan can't be canceled. It's completely effective. And if that's what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is saying, is that even the partial collateral is completely effective. Umay meshamit dekam Reb Yehuda Nasi. And so therefore, what does it mean when Reb Yehuda Nasi says that the Shemitah does cancel the loan? That means lahach palga de lo naked ola mashkon. It means for the half which the mashkon does not cover, so that part is going to be canceled. Meaning, according to Reb Yehuda Nasi, it is partially effective when you take this collateral that is only worth a portion of what the loan is. And therefore, we can suggest that this is exactly the machlokas between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and Reb Yehuda Nasi. The Reb Shimon ben Gamliel savar keneged kula hukon. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel essentially says that when you put down a down payment, it makes a kinyan corresponding to all of the metaltalin that you're purchasing. The same thing over here. This collateral, even though it's only worth part of the value of the loan, but it is effective for the entire loan. That's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Reb Yehuda Nasi savar kenegdo hukon, and Reb Yehuda Nasi, he holds that it is effective only corresponding to the value of either the down payment or the collateral, whatever it is that we're discussing. And the Gemara continues and responds, Lo, no, my eino meshamit to come Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. What does it mean that the loan is not canceled? That Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that it's eino meshamit, meaning it is going to be effective. It's lahach palga de noked oleh mashkan. It just means it's partially effective for the value of the loan that is covered, that corresponds to the value of the collateral. For that, it is effective. He's only saying it's partially effective. And the Gemara continues, well, mechlal, again, that would imply that Reb Yehuda Nasi savar, Reb Yehuda Nasi holds lahach palga de noked oleh mashkan nami meshamit, that even for the portion of the loan which the value of the mashkon, the value of the collateral corresponds to, that part will also be canceled, meaning it's totally ineffective. Then we're back to the question we asked at the top of the Amud, Ela mashkon denoket lamale. So what's the point of even having the mashkon? And the Gemara says to that, Lezichron devarim bialma. The mashkon is a way essentially of remembering the fact that there is a loan. That's why this person, I'm holding your object as a collateral. That shows that essentially demonstrates that there is a loan, that there is something that you owe me. And the Gemara continues, Rav Kahana Yahavu Le'Zuzei Akisner. Rav Kahana, he was given money to sell linen to the buyers, L'Sofi Akar Kisner, and then the linen went up in value, so he no longer wanted to sell the linen, he wanted to renege on the deal. Also, Lakami de Rav, he came before Rav. Amar Lei said to him, Rav said to Rav Kahana, B'mai de Nikita Zuzei Havlu, whatever amount of money you took for that value, you have to give the corresponding amount of linen. This is Rav following his opinion that the down payment is Kenegdo Hukona. It creates a kinyan in terms of the Mishapara, according to the value of the down payment. And then Rav continued and said, V'idach devarim ninu, the rest is just words. U'devarim ein behen mishum mechusrei amana. When it comes to words, there's no concept of bad faith. You're allowed to renege on a deal if all you did was had a verbal agreement, you can renege on that. The Itmar, as it was stated, the following Machlokas Amoraim, Devorm, when it comes to words, Rav Amar Ein Behem Mishum Mechusrei Amona, Rav says no problem of bad faith to renege. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but Rabbi Yochanan says Yesh Behem Mishum Mechusrei Amona, it is a problem of bad faith. It is a problem to renege on one's word. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma Talmud Lomar Hin Tzedek, why does the pasuk say Hin Tzedek? It talks about the fact that your hin has to be just. It's talking about having just measurements. V'alo hin bechlal eifa haya, but really hin is included in eifa. It already says eifa tzedek. It doesn't have to say hin tzedek as well. Elalomar lach, rather it's to say to you as follows. You make the following drasha: sheyehi hein shel chad tzedek v'lav shel chad tzedek. The idea is that your yes should be just and your no should be just, meaning to say you should not renege on your word. You should keep your word, and that seems to show, like Rabbi Yochanan, yesh behem mishum mechusrei amona. There's a concept of bad faith, and it seems to be a question on Rav. And the Gemara says, no, that's not what this brisa means at all, or that's not what Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda means at all. Amar Abaya says, Ahu shelo yedaber echad bepeh v'echad belev. What Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda means to say is that a person shouldn't speak one way but be thinking something else. Meaning at the time you're saying something, when you're making a certain commitment, if you're thinking at that time that what I'm saying I actually don't really believe, I don't plan on fulfilling the commitment, that's already a problem. That's a problem that your hein is not tzedek and your lav is not tzedek. But let's say at the time you say something you fully intended to do it, then later you change your mind, that would not be a problem. That's how Rav would understand the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question. We said earlier, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Afal Pisha Amru Talis Kona Dinar Zav, even though they say that the talis is what acquires the golden dinar, again, it's always the object that you make the kinyan on, Ve'ein Dinar Zav Kona Talis, and it's not the golden dinar that acquires the talis, because the money, taking of the money, does not affect the kinyan. Mikol Makam, nevertheless, Kach Halacha, that's the halacha, Avalamr, but they say, Mishapar Me'anshe Dor HaMabel Me'anshe Dor HaFlaga, the one who punished from the people of the generation of the Mabel and from the people of the generation of the Haflaga, who asadli para mimi she'eno omed b'dibur, he will punish the person who does not keep his word, and therefore it seems clear from what Rabbi Shimon is saying that a person does need to keep his word. And so the Gemara continues, Tanoi, it's a machlokas Tanoim, you're right. Rabbi Shimon does say that a person needs to keep his word, but it's actually subject to a machlokas Tanoim. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Ma'aseh Rabbi Yochanan ben Masechet, there was an incident with Rabbi Yochanan ben Masechet. Sha'amar livno, he said to his son, Tseyu schor lanu poalim, go and hire for us workers. Halachu pasak lehem mezono. So he went, he hired the workers, and he said he would provide for them meals, he would provide for them food. Uchashaba etzel aviv, when he came to his father, Amar lo, his father said to him, Beni, my son, afilu ata osa lehem kesudas Shlomo b'shaitu, even if you make for them a meal like Shlomo HaMelech when he was a king, lo yatzas yedei chavascha, you still wouldn't fulfill your obligation imahim with them. That's still not enough of a meal that you would provide. Shein b'nei Avram Yitzchak v'Yakov, because these are children of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and therefore they're entitled to demand any kind of meal. Ella, rather, what you should do is as follows. Before they actually start the work, you have to go out and you have to say to them, that you're doing this work on condition that the only claim you can have against me is for bread and legumes, and that's it. You have to specify that they're only allowed to have a certain amount. And so essentially, he was telling him to renege. Now, if you think that when it comes to words, there's a problem of bad faith, how could he tell him to go and retract? How could he tell him to renege on his word? And the Gemara says to that, well, that's not necessarily a proof, because Shani Hasam, it's different over there. Depoilim gufayu lo samcha datai, where the workers themselves were not relying on the son. So it could be that reneging in this case is actually okay for that reason. My time, what's the reason made? That yodi dialavu samach, they know that the son is relying on the father, so they know he's going to have to go to the father in order to confirm. But the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if so, even if they already started working, why can't he renege? And to that, the Gemara says, if they already started working, at that point, they are relying on the deal that they made, because they're saying, they say to themselves, he has certainly said this over to his father, and the father has accepted it, so at that point in time, it actually would be too late to renege. But the Gemara continues, did Rabbi Yochanan really say that a person is not allowed to renege on his word? But Rabba bar Bar Chana said that Rabbi Yochanan said, if somebody says to his friend, I'm going to give you a gift, he is able to retract. The Gemara first interrupts, he's able to, pshit, that's obvious, of course he's able to retract. The question here is whether it's mutter to retract. Rather, obviously what Rabbi Yochanan means is that it's mutter to retract. And this contradicts Rabbi Yochanan above, who says it's not mutter to retract. And so the Gemara says there's a distinction. Amar Papa says, Umod Rabbi Yochanan b'matana muetes. Rabbi Yochanan admits by a small gift to samcha datayu, there already the recipient is relying on the fact it will be fulfilled. And so what the Gemara means to say is by a matana muetes, you're not allowed to retract, but by a larger matana, a larger gift, you actually are allowed to retract according to Rabbi Yochanan. Rashi explains, Elavare al karchach mutter lachzor bo kamar. Again, it has to mean that Rabbi Yochanan is saying you're allowed to retract. V'yashmina dafilu chisar namana, like it's not even considered bad faith. And so then the Gemara made this distinction. Mod Rabbi Yochanan b'matana muetas. Rabbi Yochanan admits when you're talking about a matana muetas by a small gift, she'ein mutter lachzor. By the small gift, you're not allowed to retract. Misham desamcha daita de makavel adiburi. There already the recipient is relying on his word. V'chiyamar mutter lachzor. When Rabbi Yochanan said it's mutter to retract, b'matana meruba kamer, that's talking about a large gift. The lo samcha daita de makavel de lekaimel adiburi. There already the recipient is not relying on it. He understands that the person might renege. He understands that the person might change his mind. And the Gemara says, Hachanam mistabra. It makes sense to make this distinction. To Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Avo said that Rabbi Yochanan said, Yisrael sha'amar leben Levi. Let's say Yisrael tells a Levi, Kor meiser yeshlach biyadi. He says, a core of meiser, it's going to be yours, it's in my possession, but I'm going to give it to you. He can give the meiser to any Levi he wants, but he essentially promises it to this Levi. So the halach is, Ben Levi rashoy la'asos trumas meiser al makam acher. The Ben Levi can rely on the fact that he's going to get this meiser to the extent even that he can take from that meiser, trumas meiser. He can designate he's supposed to give 1/10 of his meiser to the Kohen. That's called trumas meiser. He can separate it from that on other meiser that he has. He's allowed to rely essentially on the word of the Yisrael. And so the Gemara says, if you're going to say correctly that the Yisrael cannot retract, mishum hachi rashoy, that's why the Levi is allowed to rely on that and to designate it as trumas meiser, because he's not allowed to retract. The Yisrael is not allowed to retract. This would be considered a matana muetas. But if you're going to say that according to Rabbi Yochanan you can always retract even by a matana muetas, so amai rashoy, so why would the Levi be permitted? It could turn out that he's going to end up eating tevel because he thinks he's going to receive this meiser, then the Yisrael changes his mind. That would be problematic. And so the Gemara instead answers, it's not necessarily a proof. It could be that really in general Rabbi Yochanan holds you can always retract, but in this particular case it's talking as follows, on here where the Yisrael tells the Levi, I'm going to give you this as meiser, it could be talking about, it's talking about where the Levi actually physically took the meiser from the Yisrael and then gave it back to the Yisrael as a deposit. So the Levi actually is the full owner of the meiser in this particular case, and that's why he can make a trumas meiser. But the Gemara says, if that's the case, if you're saying that the situation over here is that the Levi essentially took physical possession of the meiser, so Ema Seifa, let's look at the end of the statement. It says, Nasnu leben Levi acher. It says, let's say the Yisrael changes his mind, and he gives it to a different Levi. So Ein lo olav elataromus. It says that the first Levi, all he has is a complaint. It's not legitimately his yet. What does that mean? If you think that we're talking where he actually physically took it from him and then just deposited it by the Yisrael, why does he only have a complaint? Since he pulled it, he did a kinyan, it actually is his. He's owed money by this Yisrael. Rather, don't we see from here, we're talking where he didn't actually physically take it, and the promise of the Yisrael was enough. And the Gemara says, Shema Mina, indeed we see that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that he's not allowed to renege in this case of a matana muetas. And Rashi explains, Mishum Hachi Rashoy, again, if you're going to say that he's not allowed to renege, that's why the Levi can designate it as Trumas Meiser, Sheyeshlo Lismoch Al Mashakosiv, Sheiris Yisrael, Lo Yasu Avlo, V'lo Yadabru Chaziv, he can rely on what it says in the Pasuk, the Klal Yisrael, they're not going to go back on their word. V'lo Yitzanenu, the Levi Acher, he can rely on the fact that the Yisrael is not going to give it to another Levi. V'hamatana Muetasi, and this is just a small gift, it's something that he's not allowed to renege on. She'en Li Yisrael B'Meiser Zeh, L'Tovas Hana, because this Yisrael, he doesn't even really own the Meiser, he has what's called Tovas Hana. He's allowed to decide which Levi gets it. So he's able to give it to any Levi he wants. That's a small amount of benefit that he has, that he can choose the person, so it's considered a matana muetas. And again, by a matana muetas, the Levi can rely on this, because you're not supposed to renege. And the Gemara continues, there was a person who gave money for sesame, in the end the sesame went up in value, and the sellers didn't want to sell, they didn't want to go through with the deal. So so they did retract. And they said to him, we don't have any sesame for you, shkol zuzach, take your money back. Lo shakol zuzach, so he didn't take the money back, and ignav, and then the money was stolen, and he thought they should be held responsible because they're essentially shomrim, they're watching over the money, and it got stolen, they should owe him the money. Also, l'kamei derava, they came before before Rava for a ruling. Amar Lei said to him, Kevon da Amri Loch, since they said to you, Shkol Zuzach, that you should take your money, Velo Shaklas, and you didn't take it. Lo mi boy Shomer Sacher de lo have. And not only are they not Shomer Sacher, Elafilu Shomer Chinam Nami lo have. They're not even the status of a Shomer Chinam. They're not even responsible for negligence. They have no responsibility to pay you back. In this situation, you should have taken back your money. Amru le Rabbanan le Rava. So the Rabbanan said to Rava, V'haboy l'kbuli alem mishapar. But one second, even though the sellers are allowed to renege and they're not responsible to watch the money, but they have to accept the mishapara. They should accept that curse because they went back on the deal. Amar Lui said to them, Hachinami. Indeed, that is the case. As Rashi says, Hachinami o mishalim hashumshmin. Either they go through with the deal and give the sesame, o yekavel mishapara, or they have to accept the curse of the mishapara. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rapapi said, Amar li Ravina said to me as follows, L'didi Amar li Ahume Rabbanan v'Rav Tavus Shemei. To me, one of the Rabbanan said to me as follows, and his name was Rav Tavus. V'Amri lo Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra Shemei, and some say that his name was Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra. Dihav Yahavi le Kol Chalola Dialma. If you would have given this particular one of the Rabbanan the entire expanse of the world, Lo Hava Kamashani B'Dibura, he would not lie. And so I know what he was telling me was true. And he said as follows, B'Didi Hava Uvda, I had a case like this. Hahu Yoma Afanya Demali Shabzahava. That particular day that this incident happened, it was Erev Shabbos was coming. And I was sitting, V'asahu Gavran, a certain person came. V'kaya Bavan, he was by the gate. Amarli, he said to me, Islach Shumshmi Lizavuni, do you have sesame that you can sell me? And Rashi explains, B'didiha ve'uvda, I had a case, Oso Maisa de Shumshamin al Yadi Haya. What it really means is that Maisa that we just had above with the sesame, it actually happened with me. V'lo Kain Haya, and the incident didn't happen the way it was just quoted. It was a little different. She'ilu kibaltim loses hashumshamin, because had I really accepted, as we'll see as the story goes on, this person doesn't even agree to sell the sesame. Had I actually agreed to sell the sesame, lo yisi chosbri, I would never retract. B'chol chalolo shalolam, I wouldn't retract for the entire expanse of the world. V'lo al kain banu ladin, that actually was not the court case. They weren't arguing. We weren't arguing in court whether I owed the sesame. Elakach haya, rather the incident was as follows, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memtes Amud Beis.